Hello, creative people. Welcome to Creative Conversations. My name is Hollis Citron, and I am so happy that you have chosen to spend this hour with us. I'm going to give a little bit of a backstory of where this podcast was born from. It's from the mission of my company, I Am Creative, which is to expand the definition of creativity beyond the pencil and a paper, and to empower people, especially adults, to realize their talents and that it comes in so many different forms. So here I get to talk to these inspiring people that have professions, hobbies, interests that are so different, which is all of what my company is about. And I have guests that vary from physics teacher to actress to graphic designer to hormone biohacker and so many more people. So all of the conversations revolve around three questions. One, how do you define creativity? Two, how do you incorporate it into your life? And three, why do you think it's important? And then we have a free-flowing conversation and we see where it goes, which is the fun part. So my inspiring guest today, her name is Courtney Hunter, and I'm so glad that she got onto the podcast with no problem.
Welcome. Hi there.
Hey, just in time to hear your bio here. So Courtney is a serial creator from Philadelphia. She has experience in writing, the fashion industry, live performance, and writing. After 18 years of studying contemporary dance, she set out to carve for herself a path in fashion and retail buying. Working in the field, life happened, and she began producing contemporary dance and burlesque performances, which is so cool, under her production company, Stolen Fire Collective, which segued into her sci-fi novel that she's recently written and put out in this past October. In her free time, she records her podcast, Sentience, which is a behind the scenes, look at the making of her novel, and has evolved to all things sci-fi, the creative process, true crime, and the occult. So cool.
Thank you.
Welcome to the space, Courtney.
Yes, I'm excited to be here. I got my coffee. I am ready to chat all things creativity.
Woohoo! Love it. So is there anything else? I know we're going to dive into a lot of stuff, but is there anything you want to add initially to the bio before we dive into the first question?
No, I think that's it. That's a nice picture of who I am and what I do.
So varied, which is like what I'm so excited to talk to you about. So cool. So I would like to start off with a would you rather question.
Okay.
Dive into our main question. So, would you rather be the height 4'5" or 7'7"?
I think I'm gonna go 4'5".
Yeah, why?
Well, I think that would mean I would probably have smaller feet, and I feel like in every shoe section, like the best shoes are the smallest ones. They never have my size because I'm a really common size. So I would be able to get all of the best shoes. And then also, like, I like when people are taller than me, I think. I don't know. I would prefer to be smaller than taller. That's an interesting question, but yeah, definitely smaller. Easier to fit in places. Like, imagine being on a plane and being a lot shorter. Like, you probably, right. Well, I travel a lot for my day job, so I'm a big fan of sleeping on the tray table, which now in COVID era is so unhygienic. But you probably could get some really good sleep on a tray table if you were 4 or 5, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. 7'7" would be really uncomfortable.
For sure. You would not fit at all. It's probably just like not even sleeping on the tray table is not even an option. The seat's probably just uncomfortable.
Sleeping on the tray table.
Love it. It's my favorite thing to do on a plane or on a train.
Okay. This is going to be good. Okay. So first question, Courtney, is simple. How do you define creativity?
For me, creativity is, I think, turning my personality and my identity into something physical. It's turning something that exists more conceptually into a physical either product, entity, performance, a book you can hold. For me, it's very much wrapped up in my identity. So I think for me, it's a part of conveying who I am as a person. So that's why I think like it's very important to me. I feel like I wrap so much of who I am and how I identify like my self-worth and things like that into my creative output, which sometimes that can be a double-edged sword because it's can be dangerous to value self-worth in conjunction with output, which I've learned and have had to kind of work through, especially during the process of writing my novel. But for me, it's definitely that taking something more that exists like in the ether and making it real. It's making who I am in my mind real.
Mm-hmm. There are so many layers to that, which were so cool. Like turning your personality, your identity into something physical.
Yeah.
Capturing, it's that concept. It's like when you have that idea, like when you get those downloads and the idea is kind of planted or you have a vision in your head. And then you go through that process of, okay, so some make it to reality, something concrete, and some don't. But it's that process of thinking, okay, when you get really excited, how am I going to make this real? What's the process going to be? Which is so interesting in all that you've done. Like reading your bio, it's, you went for fashion and dance and being an author and all of these things, and then how they tied together. It's like not just that something exists on its own. It's that it exists together. One is born from the other, which is so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I have two thoughts kind of in response to that. So for me, first, and I've only realized this recently, but a really common thread between all of the things that I do is storytelling. And I ended up in my career, like my day job of retail buying because I wasn't bold enough to pursue, and I was scared. I mean, I was 18 years old. I wasn't ready to leave home. I wanted to go somewhere local. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had ideas of what like my dreams were, but not ideas of what a practical dream was, and no concept of the fact that maybe I didn't have to be practical at 18. So I picked something that felt practical and viable, but still creative. And at the heart of it, and the thing that kind of weaves everything together, the common thread is storytelling. So, in dance, that's where I really learned to tell stories. And I think starting to produce my own dance shows rather than just being a dancer in somebody else's production, that really doing that and understanding how to emote and world build and all of those things, that was really a big launch pad for my, the process of writing a novel. But there's storytelling in dance. Obviously, there's storytelling in writing a novel, and there's even storytelling in what I do in retail buying. It's creating collections and kind of curating things so the customer knows how to piece things together. I buy stationery and crafting, so I have to kind of pick items and tell a story so that she knows how to pick things for a gift or come up with a selection of items that she can use in her workspace, kind of thing. So that's one of the things that, what you said made me think of. But the other thing is I feel like, and this is kind of like on the flip side, a little bit different from that common thread of storytelling. But I think another thing too with my creativity is it's taken me a really long time and I don't want to sound like, conceited in saying this, but I struggle with like self-esteem and self-worth. And it took me a really long time to realize that I have good ideas of my own and that the stuff that's happening in my brain is pretty cool. And, I'm happy and I'm proud of myself to be able to say that. And I think now that I've kind of realized that and understood that, there's this urgency to get it out of me so that other people can see it too. And so that I can, like, obviously part of me as an artist, I think everybody wants external validation, but even more so now for myself, like I want, these physical representations or capsules or whatever of proof that these ideas were mine and I came up with this and I thought of this. So I feel like that kind of sparked some of my urgency to create and also some of my like interest in creating in a lot of different outlets. Because I have ideas for all different forms of creation. One day I want to write a movie. I want to get into acting. Like I want to do it all. And I think like kind of doing all of these different projects and making them real is like, my trail of breadcrumbs that, I had these ideas and these thoughts came from me, which makes me proud when I look back at it, which is not something I always was able to say because it kind of stems back to the fact that like, I didn't always believe in my ability and my intelligence as a creator.
I love I mean, you definitely are a writer. I mean, you're using words. You're like painting a picture in my mind as you're using the words like trail of breadcrumbs. But when you mention the word urgency,
Hmm.
are you talking about this urgency happen like 5 years ago, within the year? Like, when did this start to really kick in?
Well, for me, I think it started to happen in my, I would say around like 22, 20. Well, probably like 22, because that's when that was when I did my first dance performance. Um, and I guess my thing was like, I didn't realize, I had always danced for other people. I had watched people start their own projects. And I don't know why, I had been working in my job. I was working a lot of hours and I kind of started to realize like, do I want to like spend the extra time that I have like at my job, or do I want to like work a normal healthy amount of time to where I can excel and perform my job well without it being overkill? And then when I kind of like made that shift, I was like, what do I do with this time? And I had a little bit more money because it was my first job, so I could invest in my own projects. And I had, I kind of was like, well, what do I really like want to do? And then I was like, I've always wanted to do my own dance piece. Let's do it. And I believe I actually like, was connected with you from Daniela Galdi, but we danced at the same studio growing up, and she was a big mentor for me in the process of creating my first piece. So once I did that, I mean, from there, it kind of just it's snowballed. And I think since then, the urgency has gotten even more urgent, and I've had to kind of learn what's healthy and what's not. So once I started my book, then I started a podcast, then I started writing short stories, then I did another dance show, then I was doing burlesque, and I just felt so more confident in my creative identity than I ever had before. And at that point in my life, it was really more about getting other people to see that, you know? Like it was really about like trying to get other people to see all that I could do. Um, and then it got to the point where that was unsustainable, and I realized that was unhealthy because all I was doing was, and at this point when I realized this, I was in the editing stage of my novel because it took me about 3 years to write the novel. Um, but I realized, that's unsustainable. I need to figure out how to be proud of myself and love myself so that it's not this constant pattern of climbing up a hill to create the project, and then once it's in its final form, just this staggeringly steep drop off on the other end. Once it was over and people didn't, not that they didn't care about it anymore, but they moved on to the next thing. And it was a constant loop of that. Like I remember telling people I wrote my first draft of my book and getting a lot of buzz, and then once the week passed, that was it. And then I did that other dance show, and when that show was over, that was it. And like, it was just, I wanted validation that other people couldn't give me, that I had to give myself. So I kind of had to learn how to do that. And now on the other end, you know, I still feel a sense of urgency, but it's more of like an urgency to get all of the ideas out before I lose them, kind of thing. Like, not necessarily something where I want the validation of other people, but I just have so much that I want to get out, and I'm so excited to get it out that like I'm more so in more specific terms. I'm kind of working on a new novel, and I want to get it out, but my fingers can't write fast enough, kind of thing. So it's a different urgency, a much healthier one that's a lot more fun. But I would say this whole thing kind of really was drummed up in the last 5 years.
Touched on so many topics that I wanted to just touch on, because what you're saying is like, it's so important. In first, I'm amazed. I mean, at 22, at such a young age, you had such awareness. And I Am Creative, my company, is all about, I work with kids. I've been an art teacher for 30 years. I've worked with kids, adults, but my company is really for adults. And it's really about turning that light on for adults, because we get caught up in life, we get stuck, all of this kind of stuff, and all of our responsibilities. And we forget to be in touch with who we really are and what makes us happy and what gives us these excited urgency feelings. So it's really about reconnection. So at the age that you were when this all started is pretty amazing to me.
It's funny you say that, because for me, I kind of felt like I've always known when I was a kid that I knew what I wanted to do, but I was afraid to admit it to myself. Like, I always wanted to do something really creative. But I, grew up with very practical parents. And I think that like maybe they weren't necessarily ready for a child. And it's funny, my brother is extremely creative too. And I think it comes from our paternal grandmother. She was an artist her entire life. But I think that it kind of skipped my dad, and my mom's not really as much of like an artist. So I think like they just didn't, and not in a negative way. Like, they always encouraged, like they, let me dance for 18 years and drove me everywhere I needed to go and are so supportive, but I just don't think they understood that it could be a career, or that it could be something more than just a hobby. And for me, I kind of bought into that and thought, it wasn't something. I didn't realize I was the kind of person that one day it could be more than just a hobby. So my goal, long term, is to eventually hopefully transition out of retail buying and be working, ideally writing like full time. That would be my dream. But yeah, it's funny. Like, I kind of feel like I'm behind the game, because I knew I had a seedling of an idea that this was what I wanted, but instead I picked something out of fear. So now I kind of, even though, you say at 22, it's like, it's good to be aware of that, I still feel like I'm playing catch up to what I actually wanted to do, which I think also was a part of the urgency, because I knew in my heart back then that I wanted to be doing this kind of stuff. But I just didn't believe in myself enough, and I was afraid. So I didn't. So it's funny you say that, and it makes me feel better, because I kind of always feel like I'm playing catch up to creatives who just believed in themselves and took the leap of faith from the first chance to do it.
No, I mean, life is life, and life happens, and we get into. I think the beauty of it is now at the age that I'm at. So I'm 53. So at the age that I'm at, what I've kind of learned is you do certain things, and maybe everything leads to something else, as cheesy as it sounds, and it's just true. Even if something wasn't your dream space, even if it wasn't what you intended, it built you up to where you needed to be right now. I remember my mother saying that to me when I was younger. I'm like, why did that happen? She's like, because you weren't ready for it. And as basic as that is, I think it's so true. And as you're talking about the word like creative and the actual definition when you look it up is that creativity is the creation of an idea or an object. So that's simply what it is, which is what we're doing all the time.
Yeah.
We're constantly, in every moment of the day, we're creating something. We're creating what we're going to eat. We're creating what we're wearing. We're creating the thoughts in our head. The creative process is in with whatever you do. So for those that are listening, I just want to reinforce that here we're talking about these outlets like dance and writing and, you know, what you might quote unquote call a more creative outlet. But at the same time, whatever, if you're working with as an accountant, you're creative with numbers. Like everybody has some kind of an outlet, which is an expression. And I also wanted to touch on what you mentioned before, which was this feeling of like having this urgency of getting everything out. It's kind of like, I love the words you use, like validation, and but it leads to that space of overwhelm.
For sure.
Because it's like, well, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this, and then you're so separate. It's like you're scattered, and then it's like, I'm so scattered right now, instead of this like one thing at a time kind of thing. I've learned to write things down and like put it in a file someplace. Or I'm going to create like a wall of ideas to be like, okay, there's that. I can't touch that right now. I just can't, because I'm going to get too off track with my other stuff.
It's so true. It's funny. It makes me think of like with the next novel that I'm working on. When I wrote Sentience, I didn't outline anything. I just, in writing, somebody recently told me that you call it a plotter or a pantser. So you're either somebody who outlines everything or you're somebody who flies by the seat of your pants. And when I wrote my first book, I completely flew by the seat of my pants. And now that I'm writing this second one, I have all of these ideas, and I've been trying to at first I started writing everything down and then like creating this outline, and I was like, you know what? It's too much. It's overwhelming, and I'm not going to have that flow that I had last time, because I'm going to be thinking of all of these ideas that I have to check off like a list, and it's not going to be organic like it was the last time. Right. So when I feel like I've kind of moved away from that, and now when I feel inspired to think about this next project, instead of actually writing down ideas, I go to music or imagery, and I save pictures of things that capture the mood, or save songs that capture the mood, so that I'm working on the ambiance and the world without overwhelming myself, and more in a way that kind of like excites myself. So I totally relate to that, because I am somebody who like, if I write it all down, but you're exactly right. I have to put it away and say like, I'll come back to that, or like look at it when I need it, or look at it when I'm stuck, because I don't want to forget this idea. But also at the same time, like my mind is so full of ideas that like, save it for when I need it kind of thing. But it's true. It's so easy. I feel like if I'm so easily overwhelmed with how many things that I think of. And if I try and catalog them all, I kind of drive myself crazy.
Right. I know. I totally understand that world. It's like that shiny object syndrome. And
oh, my goodness. Yes, that's the exact perfect way to describe it.
Total shiny object. And yeah, because you get so excited. It's because you're passionate about what you do, and you see all these connections, and you can see it in your head. But there's a certain time, I think, for things to really be born. There's certain things that need more nurturing than others. I've learned not to believe so much in, like you said, I love that. What did you use when you said outlines everything or fly by the seat of your pants? There was more technical words that you used.
Oh, I just learned these this week, actually. I don't get to talk to writers a lot because I don't have a lot of writer friends, but somebody asked me if I was a plotter or a pantser.
Plotter or pantser.
Isn't it funny? I think it's so good. And I I definitely feel like if I'm kind of in the middle, but if I plot too much, I paralyze myself.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I totally. It's kind of like finding that balance because I'm totally, I guess, a pantser, like fly by the seat of my pants. I do get kind of. I understand that plotting part. You just made me think of very quickly in art school. I took a bookbinding claess, and
Uh
I am
huh.
not a perfectionist in any way. And with bookbinding, you have to have it down to the eighth of an inch, kind of thing. So in my critique, she said, "This isn't for everybody." And I just admired her so much. She was just so clean, and so like in her presentation, she was so her posture was so straight, and she like everything about her was just clean. That's just the word that comes to mind. And when she would fold the paper, it was like very, very
Perfect.
crisp and perfect.
Yeah.
And mine was clunky and kind of like, so in the end, I decided to make a clay book. I did like clay tablets and I put them in
Very
a wooden
cool.
case. And I'm like, there's
There you
my
go.
take on a book. But yeah, a pantser and plotter. That, yeah, I love that. So, okay. So let's move on to the second question,
Yes.
which is, so how do you, for yourself, I know we've talked about a lot of things, but what else do you do to incorporate creativity into your life?
That's a good question. So I feel like I've honestly I usually try as a creative, and it's funny what you said earlier kind of made me rethink my answer for this one. But I don't think I do that great of a job incorporating it into my everyday life. I really kind of like segment it off, which I think probably is a lot of the reason that I get creative blocks. But how you were saying, like creating your outfit, creating what you're eating, I oftentimes get really frustrated too that I'm, working full time. And even though my job is like very creative, I don't let myself necessarily view it as that. I kind of view it as this different thing. So I think I really need to do a better job of like incorporating it into all things and not just looking at creativity as these long scale, long winded projects. And the reason being, as a kid who danced my whole life, so I never like competed or anything. I really danced at a studio where we worked all year and performed the piece one time. Um, and I think that kind of made me the kind of person who identifies and thinks about projects in the sense of, okay, you work on it as hard as you possibly can to get it to its absolute perfect state, and then it's ready for the world. However, there's a lot of merit to, you know, quicker and more impulsive creating. And I think about, from doing burlesque, and I have some friends who are, in like the drag scene, how frequently they're performing and putting up numbers. It's such rapid fire creation, and I don't necessarily always allow myself that. I kind of let everything snowball into this huge project. Rather than like the rapid and the quick and the like the live kind of thing. So I think actually, saying this, and it's something, especially thinking about my friends who like really live the gig life. I have one specifically in mind who, I admire her so much because she just puts out so much, and it's just like that inspires her to put out more. She's such a rapid, quick creative. Um and she also does larger scale productions too, but like a lot of the stuff she does is like, putting out numbers for different like I don't performances and whatever.
Yeah,
Sorry, I like lost the
it's
specific
okay.
technical term I wanted to use there.
Okay.
But I think for me, rather than having the answer to this question and to be able to like advise people, I feel like for me, this is one I have to just do better on because I can sometimes be restrictive in what I allow creativity to mean in my own life. And I think I've gotten a lot of signs that there is benefit to creating more regularly and allowing it to bleed into other areas and letting it just be what it is rather than letting it snowball into this big thing that I have to make into something that's consumable for the world, like
Yeah.
I can create for myself too sometimes, and I don't think I do that enough.
Yeah, I think that's key. And words that you use, like to create for yourself. I mean, so much of this, from what I'm hearing, and I see a lot with people, is this perfectionism
Oh
and
yes.
the idea of it having to be hard and all this kind of stuff. And it's really about the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about doing. It's about creating whatever it is that you're creating and putting it out there, and not being scared to make mistakes, because knowing they're going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to screw
Sure.
up. It's just part of the process. But that's how it's that contrast of learning what you don't want to what you do want. So, okay,
Yeah.
you could create whatever that looks like in your world, and you can be like, well, that kind of sucked. um, so, I mean, I was cooking. This was a little while ago, and a lot of times I don't really like to follow recipes that much. But I was looking at this recipe, and instead of like 5 tablespoons of sugar, I put in I somehow misinterpreted it and put in like a ton of sugar. It was salt. And through that process, my son came in and he tasted it, and he's like, "Oh my God, like, what did you do?" And we just started laughing about it. He's
Yeah.
like, "Well, screw that. I screwed that
No,
one."
it's so true. I am somebody who it's interesting when I think about myself. I'm very left and right brain at the same time. I have all of this creative side of me, but I also have this very practical side of me. And I think a lot of it too. I mean, I think that's part of it, but I also think a lot of it stems from just being somebody who really and I keep coming back to this, but struggled with self-worth and self-love and self-esteem. That part of me, I get so caught up in the process versus the product. Like sometimes I get so fixated on the product because I lose, I think, oh, the product is, and the validation I get from the product is going to make me feel better. But what I neglect to realize is that the process, when I'm really in the process and I find something where I really get into it, that's when I feel my best. Um, and the craziest thing for me, I'm also somebody who I'm diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. So I have this very, very vivid awareness of a rational brain and in my irrational brain. So I can kind of speak and know that, when I get fixated on product, it's not the healthy relationship, and know that when I get lost in process is when I feel my best. But at the same time, even though I'm aware of that, it's so, so hard for me to reinforce that in my life and remind myself not to get fixated on product and to get lost in process. It's so hard for me to, even though I know it and I'm saying it to you,
Yeah,
and it seems so clear to me right now that what the solutions to my creative struggles are. It's really hard for me to beat that into my to get that and to rewire that script in the irrational part of my brain.
but
It's like I feel like I have two brains inside my brain sometimes.
what you're saying, it's so human. Like, it's real. And
Mhm.
in being this awareness of this, it's like being aware of the process of all of it. Like, it's all a process. So it's kind of like where you are in seeing all of that. So just the awareness is key. It's so much in learning, and like for myself and talking to so many people and seeing so many people with their creative outlets, whatever that is. It's a process, and it's accepting that process.
Mhm.
I love what you said before, where you said that you go to music and imagery to really capture a mood. I think that's such a beautiful thing to point out, because you mentioned that in regards to your writing, correct? Like you,
Hmm.
in order to literally form the feeling of that space, you kind of collect these concrete things, since you're writing and you're creating this world with your words, so then people can paint the picture in their minds and feel it. You take music and images in order to create that, correct?
Yeah, for sure. I think part of that too comes from, especially the music side of it. I think a lot of that comes from being a dancer. Everything in dance is obviously anchored to music. So for me, music is such an easy way to, it's such an easy way to choreograph. And I say choreograph, but I also mean write. Like choreograph a scene or write a scene or how to figure out like the pace of a scene or the way like it's interesting. I realized in the process of talking about my book after the fact that it's out, um, that a lot of my book is really written physically, and I think it's because I'm a dancer and also because I was listening to so much music while I was writing it. Like every dialogue is piece of dialogue is tagged with some sort of physical wording that lets you know what the characters are doing with their bodies while they're saying the things that they're saying, because I literally kind of wrote scenes like I was choreographing them. But yeah, I mean, for me, music is definitely a huge anchor point. I think just because it's so informative to this, it makes me able to like visualize a story or like visualize movement or visualize just how something unfolds. Um, it's kind of like depending on the song or whatever, like it kind of serves as a little roadmap for me. And it's interesting me saying this to you now because I feel like lately I've been pretty like disconnected from music. I haven't. I mean, aside from what I've been listening to try and work on this project, um, I haven't just been listening to it to listen to it and like let my mind just think about things. So I think I have to get into that a little bit more.
I think it's really because I get caught up in it too, and I'm sure that anybody who's listening on the call now, thank you for being here on the call, and is listening to the replay, we get caught up, and it's
Hmm.
kind of like we take the fun out of it because
Oh, I do that to myself all the time.
we get so serious about stuff, and I'm totally, guilty of this. It's this seriousness that drives the other stuff away. So it takes the whole process, the creativity, the formation of things out of it, because we have either our idea stuck on this end product, on this end goal. This is how it should look, instead of actually seeing how it unfolds. Um, and then we also block ourselves from the downloads that we get because we're so in, this is what it is. It's like this gripping, this tightness, where we're not allowing these other things in, and it can be paralyzing, and it just makes you feel crappy, like you just don't feel good because you're not having fun. Like,
No, for sure.
sometimes when I get so caught up in things, I'm like, okay, walk away. And I'll either uh, listen to music and start kind of dancing around, or go for a walk, or, go hang out with my family, talk with the kids, hang out with my husband, like do something. Sometimes going and just petting the cat. Like, we have three cats, and just laying and like just petting the cat. And then all of a sudden, once I'm kind of freed up and releasing the tides, then it's like, whew, one, I can breathe, and two, I just got more ideas. Now I know how it's supposed to go. You know what I mean?
It is. It's such a fine balance. And it goes back to everything you said earlier about like overwhelm, like I think it is too. Like I sometimes I cut myself off from sources of inspiration because I feel like if I get too much in at once, then it's just going to be, too much. And then I'm going to be paralyzed because there's too much. But then in the process, like, I think I don't realize that I'm probably missing or giving up some good ideas or things. Like, So it is such a fine balance of figuring out how to, like, what you're letting in versus what is coming from within, and then like how to balance it all. It is such an interesting thing. And I find myself sometimes stopping and thinking like to prior projects and imagining like and remembering just like how I generated the ideas and how I made the thing that I made. And now as I'm trying to embark on something new, like just trying to replicate that and just realizing like how hard it is, I think the further you get removed from it. And it's interesting for me, I feel like I've been pretty removed from creating for a while because the last year with my book has really been marketing and advertising and like the production side of things rather than the actual creative process. So that's consumed so much time that I've been really removed from like the true creative. And I think now that I am, it's time for me to start doing that more rapid, less, serious kind of stuff that's just for me, just to flex the muscles and get like the creative blood flowing again, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, it's understanding that doesn't have to be so serious. It's like just do it. Just
Yeah.
create that. Put on it. If you're dancing, put on the camera and just dance and
Mm-hmm.
just do a just do it for you. And then if anybody else sees it, then okay, that's great. But I think people just are really into seeing process and understanding that so much of it is process.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were referencing like going back to things that you did before and understanding or seeing that you couldn't recreate it, it's kind of like that awareness again, that word of that was then. You
Mm-hmm.
created it because you were feeling a certain way, you were in that space mentally, physically, whatever, and that was what the product, the sculpture that was whatever it was, the formation, you sculpted this idea, this object in that time and space, and you can never replicate that because you're not in the same place.
Yeah, it's true.
It's two different things. So it's kind of I couldn't recreate something that I did when I was in my 20s because it's been
Mm-hmm.
30 years. So it's kind of like all these other experiences, and mentally, physically, everything makes me a, an evolved person. And it's the mindset is just different.
Different. Yeah, for sure.
So I don't know. And actually, and what I'm trying to take into consideration as I'm listening to you, because I totally get where you're saying you feel like you've been separated from the creative process and being in the marketing and the advertising. And it's like understanding that within. So if we're going through these steps and in releasing your book, you birthed your book, and now it's this creative process of the marketing and advertising, which if it's not your thing, which for me,
Oh,
I
it's
tend
not.
I get caught in it and I'm like, oh my God, this is so not fun. But then it's like, okay, let me switch this in my mind. And okay, I'm learning so much in understanding how to reach people in this way and how to do that, how to communicate and how to get it out there. It's like these little tweaks in seeing that there's a creative process in every aspect of it.
Yeah, you're right. No, there definitely is. I mean, it's it's something where like certain elements and certain pockets of it have made it a lot easier, like developing imagery or you know pictures or social media, things like that. The visual side of it has been fun for me, but also a lot of these conversations, like I've done a few podcasts in support of it, and like this has been far more fun than a lot of the stuff that's been a part of the process. And there are elements and pockets of it that definitely feel a lot more creative than others, but in general it's hard too because I'm so ready to get back into the creative side of things, but at the same time, my book has only been out for a couple months at this point, and a lot of people have just kind of advised me like it takes a solid 6 months or so once it's live for there to be traction and people to be aware of it and stuff like that. And for me, I want to give it all of the love and effort that it deserves because I worked so hard on it for so long. But the part of me, the right brain, the creative, she needs to get back into something because I do feel so distant from that part of my identity. And to me, that's like the pillar of who I am, So I felt very kind of conflicted and maybe not all the way myself in the last year just because I've been so distant from that. So I'm really eager to get back into it, but it's interesting to find that it isn't as easy when you do separate from it for so long. So
yeah, and I think it goes back to that word, which is kind of like a running. It's just kind of woven in between. Is the word balance, and
yep.
It's kind of like so when you have kids, it's kind of like you birth them. You're creating this life. You birth them, then you're nurturing them, and then you have to let them go and and grow and understand that they are going to have their own thoughts and their own beliefs and their own interests and all of this, which is what you want. And then you as a person need to move on to that next step. So it's kind of like thinking about that with your book. It's like you created it, you birthed it, it's out there, and now for you need to nurture yourself in order to feel better, to feel good. And it's not going to leave your book that you just put out there behind. In fact, it'll probably make it even better because you're not holding on so tight.
It's true. That's true. This is a very introspective Saturday morning for me. I feel like I'm like kind of working through a lot of things as we're having this conversation, which is a good thing. But it's funny, I always feel like such a nerd, and I didn't do it today because I'm recording in a different room than I usually do, but I always keep like a notepad with me because I feel like when I have these conversations with people, everybody makes me realize something different about myself that I'm like, I have to write that down so that I like, I can't forget that. Or like somebody gives me just like a nugget of wisdom that I don't want to let go. So it is interesting to like have these conversations and to really take time to kind of like think about how I think and then like verbalize it. Because outside of the context of a podcast, like when do you ever really do that? Like I feel like I never do. Maybe with my therapist, but like not about all of the fun stuff, like usually about the shitty stuff in my life.
Right.
So it's interesting. I do feel like when I have these conversations, they're significant downloads for me. Like I get a lot from them.
That's amazing. And I think that's so much, I mean, in us, especially now, craving connection. I think it's just,
absolutely.
I think it's brought for me, a heightened awareness of to really be in the conversation. Like, not because we've been so rush, busy doing this stuff, which there's real stuff to that. But at the same time, it's this meditative process of understanding that if you're in this moment and you're talking to this person, then listen to this person, like, so that way you can have a conversation and kind of get beyond the just, oh, how are you? Fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
My in-laws used to say not just one fine, but two fines. I'd say, how are you? Fine. I'm like, that means it's really shitty. It's not just, but yeah, kind of like getting below the surface and actually, getting to know people. So
for sure.
Okay, so let's jump into the third question, which wraps everything up.
Yes.
Happy for everybody that's here. Any questions, comments, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and let's hear from you. So why do you think creativity is important?
I think it's important because, I mean, it does literally wrap it back up. I mean, I think going back to what I said in the beginning, I think everyone is creative. And I think creativity gives you an identity and a context as a person outside of all of the other things that you are. It is something that's very, I mean, obviously you can create collaboratively and things like that, but it's also something that's very individual. And I think that it gives people purpose and identity outside of all of the other roles that they are, be it, you know, if you're a parent, a friend, a partner, a sibling, you know, what you function as in your work life. Um, all of those things, it's something it's influenced by that, but it's certainly something separate of that. And I think it really reinforces in a lot of ways the relationship with self. And I think that your relationship with self is important in order to be, you know, your best, to be your best in all of your other relationships too. So I think it's really important, um, just for the sense of like, I think just, you know, individuality and to understand who you are, and yeah, I think that's why I think it's important. Which it kind of, like I said, it ties back to the beginning. It's like it's leaving these little time capsules, or you know, the breadcrumbs, to use that example again. It's leaving the little breadcrumbs of like just of really who you are, on your own terms, without the labels or the constructs created by anybody else. It's just it's you having, is, you know, the final say in that, and then kind of putting something physical out, and you know,
Yeah.
there it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you just mentioned the word labels, because that's what I was thinking, like, as you were talking. It's like leaving those labels behind, doing for you. It's your,
Yep.
it's your voice, it's your expression. You need to get it out.
Yep.
It see so many people so holding back, holding back so much, and really getting to know themselves. And for me, it's a process of too of getting to know myself, and
That's true. That's a really good way to put it.
getting to know who I am. And like, you're with yourself your whole life, like you're in your body. you're,
Yeah.
you're not leaving. You're with yourself 24/7. So you might as well make this a relationship that is a compatible one where you actually really love yourself. And it's not love yourself in a narcissistic way. It's loving yourself to realize, I really enjoy doing this, and I'm going to do that because it makes me feel good. I am going to I really love eating this food because it brings up all these feelings in me. And I'm going to do that because it makes me feel good. And again, it's not coming from this hurtful, narcissistic way. It's coming from a space of loving yourself.
For sure. Yeah,
And
no, I think that that's a perfect way to kind of like put a bow on it. I mean, it is. It really is. It's all about the relationship with yourself, and making it a positive one. And I think that that is a huge reason why it's so important.
yeah, so whew, this has been really, really good. So before we do all of the closing stuff, tell everybody how they can find you, find your book, all of that.
Absolutely. Well, first, I want to just like give a well, not 5 second, but a quick synopsis of what it's about. So,
Uh-huh.
Sentience, it's about, it follows 24 people who are going to take place in a Turing test, which, to give you like a 30,000 foot view of what a Turing test is, it's basically a situation where humans and humanoid AI are put into a contained situation, and the humans have to discern who the AI are. And since they're humanoid AI, they look human. And if anybody is familiar with what a Turing test is in the context of history, they're probably going to cringe at that example. But it gets the job done. Anyways, so that happens. And in the process, you know, the experiment's being run by this corporation that's greedy and is looking to kind of just get to the end result, and the stage where they can profit off of the technology that they've created. And the whole process really explores the ethics of artificial intelligence, the applications, you know, how they'll be used in the future. There's romance, there's thrills, it's, you know, got adventure, but all really anchored in science fiction, obviously. So I like to describe it as Westworld meets the Hunger Games for grown-ups. So that's what Sentience is. You can find it on Amazon. Right now, the paperback and the ebook are both on sale. And at the end of the year, I'm actually going to be doing a free download of the ebook. And you can stay on top of that by either going to my website, which is www.courtneyphunter.com, or following me on Instagram at Courtney Patricia Hunter, where I'll be posting about all of that good stuff. And in the new year, I actually, to mention Daniela again, Daniela did the audiobook for my book. So an audiobook version will be out.
Yay! Uh-huh.
Yes, so an audiobook version will be out in the new year. So that is where you can find me.
Wonderful. So you will give this all to me, and I will put it in the bio of the podcast so people can see it.
Absolutely.
As well. So yeah, this is wonderful. So Courtney, I am so happy and grateful that you were able to take this hour with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was awesome. Like I said, I feel like I've gotten a little bit of a therapy session here for me. So I feel like I have some better understandings of myself after having talked through all of this. So I'm really grateful.
Yeah. Well, it's always good to take that. I mean, this is the space created in order to inspire each other, share stories, and connect. Like, this is what this is all about. So in having the conversations, I'm always learning so much about myself as well, and about other people. And how to help people how to reach more people through my company, I Am Creative. So please check out iamcreativephilly.net and see all that I offer there. And I'm just so grateful for everybody that was able to spend the hour with us and listening. So I wish everybody health, happiness, all of this good stuff. Tomorrow I'm doing another podcast at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And have a wonderful Saturday wherever you are in this world. So thank you again, Courtney. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.